There was an anti-vax protest in Hollywood Boulevard just this last weekend. It's devastating, the misinformation, and it's resulting in people being killed. But that doesn't mean that it didn't produce some fun moments, including this, when one of the anti-vaxxers tries to co-opt one of the unhoused into spreading their message. It doesn't work out like she might have expected. Okay, so I apologize with us having to bleep it out. I don't know how clear that was, but the woman yells, you see all of these homeless people, they're not dead in the streets. So the idea being it's all made up, because if it was gonna be killing people, it'd be killing them and they're still alive. Ipso facto, the vaccine doesn't work and isn't necessary because there's no COVID. Well, the unhoused individual yells back, because I'm vaccinated, you dumb F. Which I just love that. That's some great improv, didn't hesitate. And so I appreciate that, JR.
Yeah, there's a sense, and I learned this from the Neighborhood or Next Door app, one of those that I've seen. People in, at least maybe the communities I've seen, there's this sense that unhoused folks aren't in your community, that they're not a part of your society, that they're just kind of there. It's like a fire hydrant or something that you just kind of walk by and they don't really participate. So there's this assumption that unhoused folks don't know what's going on, don't catch a glimpse of the news, don't have an idea of a virus that's spreading across the world. They think that they're just totally detached and they're just these tree stumps that have to be moved to the next place, because they always go, move them out, ship them out, pick them up, take them out. What does that mean? These are humans and they have brains and they know what's going on. So if you say, how are all these unhoused people just not dying in the streets? First of all, some of them are. And number two, maybe some that aren't know that they have to go get vaccinated. Like there's a superiority complex that are like, oh, see, these lower people that are nothing compared to me, they're not dying, so what's the situation? Hey, idiot, I pay attention to things and I took some action. Like there's this, like people don't just sit in, now what people are upset about now in LA, they don't just sit in their tent and then just don't do anything all day or not pay attention to our society. They're still living. They're still living. And they want to still live. It's just this, I don't know, man. Like, so that assumption went into her approach to saying that, and probably was startled by the fact, I mean, they let him in a facility to get vaccinated. Why would they do that? He's just a homeless person.
Medicine? He got medicine and he didn't die from the vaccine, but I read on VAERS. Yeah, you're totally right. It's a belief that these aren't real people. They're something. It's a force of nature. They're not individuals who have a connection to reality, care about their own healths, want to continue living. So she got a little bit of a wake up call there. To your point about the moving, just really fast, I saw a headline and it was following the Huntington Beach oil slick. Some in Huntington Beach now think it might be time to stop offshore oil drilling. And so I tweeted, like arguably it was bad before it washed up on your beach. The same with the plight of the unhoused. Like it doesn't become an issue just because it's in front of you. It still exists. Don't treat people like an oil spill, basically. But anyway, we did not launch into that video just to laugh at that particular anti-vaxxer, although that would have been enough for me. I want to be clear about that. But no, we decided we would add a little bit of substance to it too. And that is that while that individual has received access to the vaccine, that is not to say that there isn't more of an obstacle to those who are unhoused to get access to vaccine, in addition to basically everything about life. And as of right now, there is still a lag in terms of percentage vaccinated. So 2 weeks ago, the LA County Department of Public Health reported that an estimated 43.5% of the homeless population is vaccinated, well below the 60.6% of county residents overall. So that, look, your takeaway from that is likely, well, it's terrible, it's like 50% lower. Mine is also 60.6% in LA. But anyway, that is bad. And I also want to make sure that people understand, while that woman was trying to make the case that, look, the homeless are fine, so it's not real. Well, so first of all, it is real. And also, no, not so much that they're fine. it hasn't been a big topic of national conversation, but the unhoused have been devastated, as you would expect, from the virus, although we don't really know how badly. And we likely never will, due in no small part to the fact that people don't care, really.
Yeah.
And that they don't believe that these are real people fundamentally. And so I'm gonna get to some of the numbers, JR, but the idea is that it just isn't really being tracked in the same way that like in prisons and things like that. These are populations that we've decided effectively,
Yeah. And the reason we can do that is because there's enough people. I mean, even people that care about the homelessness situation in America and specifically in bigger cities and stuff like that, people who do care about it, there's a degree to which then you kind of forget. You move on, like we got to do something about this, and then you go off to work, and you make your money, you come back home, you pick up your kids from school, and you're not thinking about it. But it's continually happening within our society, and there's no real initiatives being done. And I'm sure there's groups that are fighting for it, but how much do we pay attention to that? We pay attention once we see a whole bunch of tents and motorhomes under a bridge overpass, and then we go, we got to do something about this, But what are you gonna do about it? How do you fix it? And the solution is always shove it to the next town. Then what about that town? They're gonna be like, so what are we gonna do now? It's constant. There's no real answer, and there's not enough people really wanting it to change for solutions to really be introduced.
Yeah. Well, look, Furball in the chat apparently works as a contact tracer, says we ask about housing status for every case, but the media doesn't ever seem to report about it. Well, I'm gonna give you some of what we do know, what the media has figured out. So one attempt to track all US COVID-19 homeless deaths through official records turned up 373. That is, of course, an undercount, as is pointed out by a consumer advocate with the National Health Care for the Homeless Council, Katherine Cavanaugh. She says housing status is not on any major COVID dashboard. It's not to say that nobody knows in some states, in some areas, but it has not been a focus nationally. And of course, the interesting thing is that while they're not getting logged as having died from COVID, the death rate for the unhoused last year did go up. Again, you won't be surprised to see this. One study shows that the mortality rate of homeless people in New York was 75% higher than the city's rate. And what cities here in California and across the nation do know is that homeless deaths overall rose sharply back in March 2020, the first big month of the pandemic here that we know of. They tripled in San Francisco this spring, and this year rose 32% in Los Angeles and 54% in Washington, D.C. Yet many experts remain puzzled because few of these excess deaths were officially attributed to COVID-19. In fact, just here in LA, we normally have about 100 deaths among the homeless population every month, that is crazy. So an additional 40 to 60 per month beginning in March. But of the nearly 1,000 homeless deaths that occurred between January and July of 2020, the period for which statistics have been analyzed, just 36 were attributed to COVID. Now, it's not to say they were not dying of other things. They likely were in some cases. But that was the big change during that period. It hit LA hard. The idea that so few are actually from that is just, it's not 4% of the explanation. We know that at the very least.
Yeah, this thing is, again, it's an extension of our own society. There's people within our society that aren't able to get access to the hospitals, and we're overcrowding in some situations, depending on where you're trying to go. And then maybe they didn't get cancer treatments, they didn't get treatments for their heart condition, all this stuff, and they do end up developing further issues or dying because of access points. It's the same thing for the unhoused. Humans are humans. They may still have the same kind of health issues many of us have, or maybe more because of the situations that some folks have to live in. And if they don't have access to the hospitals or even don't think they can go, they're passing away of other things or getting sicker from other things, still exacerbated by the COVID situation. It's the same type of changes that you'll get from folks who live in other places. And by the way, the unhoused doesn't just include people who live in tents and motorhomes. Some folks are couch surfing. Some folks are just, are living in, an aunt's house, whatever. They don't have their own place. This is homelessness too.
That's true. Yeah. And it might be, coming across more people than would have been ideal back during this period when we're trying to limit that sort of thing.
How many people were evicted? Eviction moratoriums are getting put out. All that was a story at one point. It results in real people being kicked out of homes and then being homeless. That's real. Like after we talk about it back in June, doesn't mean it stopped in July.
Yeah, and by the way, so this is one thing I came across in my research on this. So according to one medical analysis, on average, the body of a 50-year-old person living on the streets is physiologically more like that of a 70-year-old. And of course, we know that being older and having things like hypertension, diabetes, these sorts of things, other chronic illnesses make COVID worse. And you're certainly not going to get access to the treatment for COVID at the same rates. And if you do need medical help for a variety of non-COVID things, we know that the hospitals have been slammed off and on for the last year and a half. So all of this is contributing to increased deaths for everyone, but at higher rates for the unhoused. So they are not just a prop for your protest. They're a group of actual humans suffering even more than we normally have seen during this pandemic.
Yeah.
Anyway, maybe the anti-vaxxer learned something. Probably not.
For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The Damage Report. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.